Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Index podcast, where we come together every couple of weeks to discuss on-chain data, chart crimes, and metrics that move the crypto industry. Today, I have with me Hildoby, resident data house elf at Dragonfly.
Hello, everyone.
Denning, chief on-chain sleuth at Pantera Capital.
Hi.
We have a recurring guest, Andrew, Shepard at Hurt.
Hello, hello.
And I am Boxer, and I'm the community powers at Dune. Before we start, nothing we say here should be relied upon as legal, financial, investment, tax, or even life advice. We're acting independently of our respective professional roles. And I think we need to disclose that both Hildoby and Denning are seed investors into Herd. So we need to disclose that both of them are working for a VC firm. But yeah, with that out of the way, hey Andrew, good to have you back. Obviously, I don't think Andrew needs any explanation in the data space, so maybe we just jump right into what are you doing nowadays, Andrew?
Yeah, of course. After my long stint at Dune, left to start Herd back in 2024, which feels kind of weird to say. It's been a year and a half now. The team has grown to 6 beautiful faces, and we're still working on solving the same problem, which we termed as composability back in the day, but now that we're B2B, it's now more research, execution, due diligence. That's very much our focus. So I'm sure we'll get into the details of what that means and how we're helping teams leverage AI to do it. I guess through the rest of this pod.
Should we ask why the name Herd or save it for later after we have a good understanding of it?
I mean, that's an easy one. Herd as the 2 things I care the most about in crypto are the things that keep me in the space is like composability and collaboration. I think that a lot of teams, when they see crypto, it feels very adversarial and like single player. And it's like, I want it to feel like, again, like very similar to what Dune felt like, where it's like very collaborative. You have a community you can work with, but this community now includes AI agents. So that's the Herd. It's you're working with others and you're working with agents.
Was this the initial plan when you started the company, or was it because like at the time, like back in 2024, agents were not that much of a thing? I think you could barely kind of like get ChatGPT to write code that works. We hadn't even seen Cursor, I think, at that point. So how did that come about?
Yeah, I mean that was the exact theory. I was playing with it when I was in Bangkok, early versions of, I guess, what was LangGraph back then. It was very clear to me. It's like, okay, you're going to be able to spin up agents. At that point, I thought it was going to feel like an email inbox, where it's like you're emailing your agents and you're sending your agents on different like research tasks. That still hasn't really panned out of like an agent mailbox. People decided to go into terminals instead, which I had not guessed it's going to be very terminal based. I thought it was still going to be more UI based of like, you just like, hey, there's this Uniswap pool, like go and research it every day for me. Send me a little detail. And so that's actually one of the early designs I've heard was like this like research inbox, but that never saw the light of day.
I mean, OpenClaw is now kind of doing things like this,
it's like we're kind of circled around actually to a lot, and I'm sure we'll get to this, but like the product we're selling now is like what we wanted to sell at like January of 2025. But like there was just like no appetite for it at the time. And so now like 9-10 months later of pivoting a few products, we're like, oh, there's now a market for this again. Let's run it back. So it's funny. I'm sure anyone building a product or startup has felt this, where it's like you build a product, you're a little ahead of the market, eventually it comes back and you're like, all that other wheel spinning we did, meaningless.
Yep. So it always turns out. Oh, no, not always, but it's something. This way a lot. Yeah.
Market timing is real.
Okay. So I mean, we'll have to kind of get you into pitch mode for a second. Of like, in a few short sentences, what does Herd enable teams to do nowadays that they can't do without Herd?
Yeah. So what we're seeing is there's many more businesses and institutions. And when I say that, I mean like real businesses and institutions, not just pure crypto companies who are trying to get more into crypto. That normally looks like either deploying capital through these, whether it's vaults, pools, etc., or integrating crypto like stable coins to offer to their customers, right? And as we watch that play out, we see the difficulty that most of these teams have with actually understanding, like researching, due diligencing contracts, integrating, analyzing, monitoring them, right? You can kind of think of it as there is this life cycle. Someone's like, hey, we want to integrate a Morpho vault, right? And it's like, great. Okay. Someone go and research, like, what is Morpho? What are their contracts? How does this specific vault work? Who has control over this vault? How will you monitor that over time? And then how do you do the actual contract integration, querying about like the yield of your position, and then producing like an audit trail of like, okay, now we have this vault that like, Coinbase customers can borrow and deposit from. How do we track those transactions, give it to the audit team, give it to the compliance team, when it's now just like, crypto used to be everyone is their individual degen. We all manage things individually, and it's fine if, we don't have to share the context or have a full great audit or tax record. Not saying that I don't have a good tax record, but, up in the air. But now with these teams, it's like, 20, 30, maybe 100 people who need to share context across how you actually integrate and build in crypto. And that's just a really hard process, right? For people like us, we're used to like, oh, we start in documentation. The docs are a little theoretical. Maybe there's a white paper. Then there's a list of addresses. You go to Etherscan, Dune, Tenderly, BlockSec, and you're like, all right, I'm going to sink a week and a half into just understanding all of this. Right. And the reality is most of these institutions and businesses, like they do not have someone who's willing to go and do all that work, because if someone does have that capability, they're probably working at like a very good startup or just starting their own company now. Right. So we obviously see that as a business opportunity. And especially in the age of AI, it should be very easy for like anyone who's tried out, Perplexity or, GPT 5.2 Pro to do like deep research over the web. You should be able to do similar things with contracts. And so that is kind of the core premise of our product. And obviously we're helping different teams at different stages of their crypto maturity with that research, due diligence, test execution, and like monitoring process. So
I hear that it's almost like I hear that it almost like how I initially pitched how data is important in crypto, which is like blockchain is supposed to be transparent, but if you don't understand what does that mean on Etherscan, the transaction, the gas, and everything, it doesn't really mean anything. And so in your case, it's like smart contracts for DeFi are supposed to be permissionless, but it's just like the readability and understanding takes such a barrier. And here now Herd can be that like comprehensive layer. And so actually makes it permissionless. Yeah,
I think like data in crypto has been mostly like aggregation focused, I would say, in the last 5-6 years of like, if you can get total addresses, total volume, total fees, TVL, like that's like the bulk of the work and the bulk of what people care about. At least in call it the airdrop era. I don't really know what to call it. There's so many, so many different cycles, but call it like the age of farming metrics. But that is different from like operational read and write, right? Like when you go to deposit into like, if you're choosing to integrate a Morpho vault in, let's say it's a Steakhouse vault, and you're offering that to like $1 billion customers, like you don't just care about like, oh, how much TVL does this vault have, right? There's a lot more like operational read and write complexity there. That I think the industry hasn't quite caught up with yet. And so like our focus is very much on like, okay, how do we capture both that read and write side of that operational complexity? And we can go into examples later. I've been looking at the newest Steakhouse Morpho V2 vault, and that's actually a good example it's normally when I show people like, oh, you think it's just one contract, but there's like 30 contracts here, and they all have different roles. They have different queues. There's different signers, and the way that you can simulate these things is also very complex. So,
without giving away too much secrets, like what is the customer base? Like, am I a hedge fund that's trying to like deploy capital, and then kind of like make sure that it's actually like I do that in like a reasonable manner, and like all of those contracts, like I understand like the risk across like the different protocols, and like what am I actually touching on chain, like what is the actual footprint of like I deposit money to Morpho, but then like okay, there's like a blast zone, and like I'm just aware of all of these things, and then I see if like I guess like walk me through that.
Yeah. So it's a two-sided marketplace, right? Because you have protocols on one side, right? Lido with their ST vaults, or Morpho with their Morpho vaults, or I would even categorize some curators like Steakhouse in there because they write their own contracts. So part of our time is spent talking to them, being like, hey, when you need to be able to explain this to the businesses you're talking to, you can use Herd to help them explain and understand and test things versus pointing them to just documentation. Because a lot of these teams, like the best teams, even like Uniswap, are still writing documentation by hand. And I'm personally like a non-believer of writing protocol documentation by hand anymore, just because of how quickly it gets out of date. And it's also like the Morpho docs on how a vault works is like so high level that like the way Steakhouse manages it is very different from how Gauntlet does it. And just knowing the high level docs in theory doesn't help that much when they're talking to like, a Coinbase or like even like a JP Morgan or something, right? So protocols are one side of the market. And then obviously like liquidity providers, institutional funds are the other side, right? The people who are LPing into these Steakhouse vaults, like into the Gauntlet vaults, KPK, whatever. They need an easier way of actually monitoring, like, okay, how do I due diligence this once to start trusting the vault and the curators, or like this, whatever the hooks, like, what we're doing is not just applied to like only Morpho vaults. It works for any contract on Ethereum. I'm just giving this as an example. And so we talk to a lot of these institutions as well, to be like, hey, you're trying to integrate more DeFi, either for deploying your own capital or for offering it out to a customer. You're not going to be able to scale that by having like, one or two DeFi analysts covering like 5 vaults at a time. There's not enough people who know this stuff well enough to scale that. But you want to be able to cover more vaults. You want to be able to cover more DeFi protocols. So those are kind of like, again, both sides of the market are always talking to each other. And it's normally like a drawn out process of like, oh, give me the contracts. Oh, can you bring this dev on? Can you bring this audit person on? Can you bring this analyst on? And a lot of the answers there can just be drawn out with Claude Code and the Herd MCP server. So that's the simple sell. Obviously we're still very early in our life cycle. So it's like, not like I'm like, oh yeah, we have, 50 customers doing XYZ for us. A lot of this is, we're in early testing. We're finding the best design partners for us and like our interests, and obviously their interests to build with long-term. So if this sounds like you can reach out to me on, on Twitter and Telegram at Andrew Hogg 5297.
So essentially, it's a big context machine. It's
a big context machine.
You've built a big read machine of like those other contracts, but then like, do you feed all of the docs in there, or like how much enrichment have you done versus just like kind of like connecting all of the different dots together, which is like that is a like insane infrastructure task. So like, but I'm just wondering, like, is there like a lot of custom work that you guys are doing, or is it more like, okay, we just kind of like connect all of these dots together and then like things just kind of like the AI kind of like makes everything work together?
And we can get into like what tools are in RMCP. A lot of it is on like, you're either going wide or you're going deep, right? So like, we don't take care of like, oh, if there's something you can search on the web, you should still use web search to learn about certain things. Like we're not saying like, oh, only use Herd for something. But a lot of our focus is on connecting the dots, right? Because like, let's say you have this Morpho Vault factory, right? And you want to understand how people are using it. You start with the Morpho Vault factory. You almost always start with either a contract, transaction, or wallet, usually a contract or wallet. And like from there, you're going to be like, okay, there's a Morpho factory. I want to understand how that factory works. Like, what are the functions on the factory, right? And like what's the context of how people are using them? So we'll summarize like literally like for given all the functions and events, like how do they tie together? What are examples of how people are using it? Things that would take like, maybe 10 or 20 tool calls and like combining the Etherscan API and like Dune API and all of that. It's just one tool call. And you'll find, okay, there's, a transaction where there's a vault deployed. Then you want to be able to query the transaction and look like very deeply at the data, right? And for that, we combine, like we do a lot of our own like decoding and, decompilation and enrichment, but it's very similar to like the depth of data that Tenderly gives you, but tied more to like context versus like, oh, what is the memory? Like, what is the memory opcodes being called? Right. And from there, you might find, oh, this vault was actually deployed by Steakhouse. And well, not only do you want to know, like, obviously you want to know that this is a Steakhouse vault, but you also then want to know, like, what else has Steakhouse deployed? Or like, how are they actually managing this vault? Right. And then you get into like, okay, what specific transactions are they doing? What transactions do they have queued? I want to find transactions where they're specifically calling this vault. And you start to build out this like map or relationship graph between contracts, transactions, and wallets that helps you build a picture of like, okay, I now start to actually understand how this like real example of a Morpho vault works versus like if you go to, the Morpho docs itself, you get these nice like overview pictures, but it doesn't actually tell you like here, there must be I'm sure there's a better one in here. Yeah, it's like very theoretical about like, there's a curator, there's an allocator, there's a bunch of like code terms in here, versus actually being able to see like, oh, there is this vault allocator. These are the functions that are called. These are the other contracts that are called. Right. Essentially, you have to help the LLM build up this web because these are not things that you can just get from web searching. Right. And like, again, some of this you could probably do with Dune queries or like from Etherscan. But like we've kind of put together the best lookup methods and patterns into simple tools so that you don't have to go and set up like 5 other services and like 20 skills to even get started. So there's a half a decade of research and analyst lessons from the team's experience built into this MCP. It's a very long-winded answer.
Does it give me a lot of like nostalgic vibe that I wanted to like mention? My first job at a Consensus, I was working at a data company called Alethio, and we were building something that's like an Etherscan competitor, but also with tracing. So like the traces we can show like structure of how the smart contract call from one to the other looks like and what function it was. So it's almost basically this. And there has been a lot of similar tool in the past. For example, like EigenPhi, which was one of the main MEV data provider. They had this very useful visualization as well, where like to show this bot caught this contract and like swapped here and did a flash loan and then like rebalanced here and there. And so I just think all these things are really the key to understand all these operations. Maybe you can do like a viral campaign about like basically exposing the most profitable new bots and like what their strategies are.
There are some teams that use.
People can definitely use your tool to build that.
Yes. Yeah. That is actually one of the top cases right now is for like wallet profiling is like, okay, give this person's wallet. Like we can look up their deploys. We can look up their transactions. We can look up their multisig transactions because it's just about building the web out of like, okay, of like how many of these, and we have decompilation of unverified contracts as well. Thanks to Heimdall from John Becker over at Coinbase, who used to be at Shadow.
See.
Good times.
Yeah.
But yes, we have like all the unverified contracts, so like wallet profiling is one case that teams use us for. But again, it's like, all of this is like the story of crypto tooling is there's 50 different tools that are good at different things. And you used to have to build out these tools manually because it's like you would have to build out a MEV specific analytics tool because otherwise no one's going to figure out how to write the queries for it. Right. But now we're at a stage where like the LLMs are actually like, if you give them, a nice abstracted table, like a good spellbook table, like it can figure out how to query it. Right. It can figure out how to like break down those queries as well if it needs to do its own custom Dune queries because something's not in the spell. So it's purely like all right, you just have to help it like build its relationships. Like when I say like research and due diligence, it's basically like, how do you find like within the unknown unknowns, what contracts are relevant? And then how do you find the right transactions to QA against? Right. Because the hardest part is like, if I tell the agent, whether it's to build me a data pipeline or to build me like a Morpho integration, the hardest part's not writing the code. It will spit out some query or some code, right? The hard part is like, is it tied to the right contract? And like, is it producing the right data? Right. And so at the simplest level, like I tell a lot of our users, like, look, you should still be like, we're not competitive with like Dune or Allium or Gold Sky or like any of these other data products, or like competitive with like, oh, you can't use the Morpho SDK or something. It's like, we just sit at the start of the journey, because like Dune and like other teams are like so focused on the MCP for their own product, they're not going to go build out a full like block explorer contextual search MCP. Not because they can't, but just because like, yeah, they already have enough on their plate. Right. And so we're just like, hey, use us to help with that initial research, and then also to help with the QA after whatever task has been done. Right. And the agent will build whatever eigenphi or whatever tools it needs in the middle to help it out.
So if I connect my agent to the herd MCP, I can not only get, of course, a thorough understanding of how contracts work. Let's say like I want a thorough understanding of how Morpho actually works. What are the who is a curator and everything. Could it also naturally, help me integrate it much better, or how much hand lifting would I need for my OpenClaw or whatever I'm using?
Yeah, I mean, to install, it's just one command. It's just
I mean integrating a vault. Let's say not installing the MCP.
Yeah. So what we found so far is it's like teams that were struggling to one shot like these pipelines or integrations before are able to one shot it now with Herd. Obviously, for certain things like if there's a specific Uniswap hook you want to build on, we still have to help with like writing a skill or something that specifically helps with like, hey, for a hook, you want to look into XYZ. But I mean, that's kind of the next step of what we've been working on with these like different protocol teams is like, okay, we have the Herd MCP server, you have your SDKs and everything else. We just need a simple skill on top that is for specifically people building on like Morpho V2 vaults or something. Right. Because like the skill is like like skills are now documentation. They're basically just quick start guides. It's like, what is the quick start guide to doing XYZ? Right. If you just have the quick start guide, the agent's going to get lost on everything else. But if you have the quick start guide and you have the tools, we found the agent's been like very good at like, again, one-shotting, integrating vaults with like good understanding of like, because obviously if you want to integrate a vault, it is just like deposit redeem in some sense. But like being able to create like simple queries or simple like TypeScript snippets for actually monitoring the vault and understanding like, oh, okay, we should pay attention to this multisig's queued transactions. That is stuff that like it only isn't really able to find with the Herd MCP. So
when you say integrate, what do you mean? Like just like I deposit money into the vault? Is that kind of like
when you need to basically integrating is just like when you need to execute and then read, right? So like you have to be able to deposit either your money or your customer's money into a vault, but then also monitor like not just the APR, but like what allocations are potentially changing beneath it. Because there's a lot of hidden functions.
Yeah, but this is not Stakehouse kind of like building their custom contracts to then kind of
this is
like somebody just like using the Stakehouse vaults and then
right.
kind of like
exactly. So like a good example for Stakehouse is like, oh, instead of integrating with the Morpho vault specifically, like our MCP would help you find that like, hey, Stakehouse actually has a helper contract. You should integrate that helper contract. Right. But also keep in mind that this helper contract has XYZ like roles attached to it. So in some sense, like it's not the best analogy, but like it's similar to like in the DAO days where it's like, oh, you have a DAO, a bunch of people can deposit into it and a bunch of people can propose and vote. Like vaults and DeFi are kind of becoming the same thing where it's like, oh, you have a vault or a pool. there's a bunch of hooks and adapters and modules you can add to it. So like it's a lot more complex than DAOs because it's not just on one contract, but in some sense it's still the same of like, okay, you have like maybe Blackstone comes in. How are they supposed to know which DAOs on which assets and adapters they have access to for like revoking, like if they wanted to veto an allocation change, you know, or like remove their assets? That is much, much harder to track now because you have to go untangle like, oh, there's this Lido vault, but it's actually a Mellow vault. Oh, this Mellow vault actually has a deposit queue. Oh, this deposit queue actually has a permission. Like if you're a KYC institution, you can skip the queue, you know? And it's like, okay, how do you help someone figure that out? Right. Because if they go to do it by hand, like even when I look by hand, I might not catch like, oh, actually there is this other contract that I should be looking at. Right. This is just very like it's just time consuming to catch. So
I would imagine my frame of mind for these things would be that there's just BD guys talking to BD guys, and then they're basically like, we're gonna trust you, and like that's gonna be the whole stuff. But like basically you were saying like that is probably the status quo, and you're like, okay, like this is obviously not the way to go. We should have like checks and balances.
It was fine when it was just like a few small like crypto VC funds that were deploying. But now is like, again, as the VC funds have gotten more advanced, and also like for the actual institutions with like billions, like even Coinbase, for example, like when they integrated Morpho for borrow lend, it was literally just the single stakehouse vault. Right. They're literally going one vault at a time because that's how careful they are. And like, yes, it is BD talking to BD, but like it's the classic, like between the BD and BD conversations, there's so much other back and forth that it's like, if you now tell Coinbase, like, great, go and integrate all Morpho vaults, they're going to be like, what the, what? No,
Yeah.
You know? And so it's like our product is like, well, how do you scale that? Like, how do you scale like integrating across all Morpho vaults and then also all Lido vaults, and then also all these RWA stuff like vaults where it's like, oh, Aave actually has like 3 different markets deployed because some of it's prime, some of it's RWA. What's different between the prime and RWA? Who has the governance controls over what risk parameters? Who has the recourse? Is there on-chain recourse or not? You know, like the assets that we're bringing on chain are becoming better, and also the capital moving on chain is more mature. So for us, like, you know, it's a B2B, like we're very much a B2B play now. That's like, all right, we're not going for that one degen, like that's trying to yeet into like a 20% APR vault anymore. I'm like, great. They don't really care. They're just in and out, you know, we're going after the institutions where it's like, there's an actual team involved with like due diligencing and integrating every vault. All right. And the fact that like, again, I cannot stress enough to people, like, we're out of 2023 where it's like, oh, every Uniswap V3 pool is the same, right? If you've looked at one Uniswap V3 pool, you've looked at all of them. Like now it's like every pool, every vault is like a custom structure, and you should treat every single one of them as its own protocol, right? You shouldn't think like, oh, we've done one Morpho vault, adding the next Morpho vault, it's exactly the same. Like that's just not how DeFi works anymore. And I see it only becoming more and more complex because, like, you know, we've kind of given up on removing KYC and we've now moved into like, okay, you have roles and permissions at the vault level, at the hook and adapter level, and then also at the wallet level. If you look at like what Fortify and Turnkey do with their policies, like they've written whole new like computer science languages for managing policies. Yeah. They have like their new like DSLs, domain specific languages, for like, how do you actually define what your wallet is or isn't allowed to do and who can sign on it, right? For Privy, it was just signers where it's like, oh, you have a signer key, you know, FriendTech can technically do anything. They can sign anything for your keys. And a lot of these consumer Privy apps, it's like, yeah, technically the app has full signer control in a sense, right? But for institutions that use like Fireblocks or Fortify or Turnkey, like the policy management is like much, much more complex. And obviously it's like, okay, ideally the safest is it's enshrined in the contract, right? Which is why you see Stakehouse with a lot of their new contracts basically enshrining more and more of this into the contract itself, because that's safer than like the policy being written at the wallet level per se, right? And so, anyways, it's fun stuff. It's like it's evolving very quickly. The complexity of it.
I was gonna say, is there a security component to the current product? Because I imagine, like in the case you described, this person, product lead at Coinbase, to decide we're gonna integrate 10 different vaults, and one of them may have like vulnerability and maybe recommended by an MCP, and it's like, oh shit, now our founder lost. Obviously, the vulnerability comes from the smart contract code, not really from the MCP layer, but still, you kind of had like advice that, or somehow, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I normally don't say we're like...
At the same time, sorry to interrupt, but at the same time, I feel like you definitely have the capability to maybe do like hundreds of simulations, even attack simulations. So to beforehand prevent that type of risk, like even a risk level assessing to every vaults you're integrating and recommending to the companies.
Yeah. I hesitate to say we do like AI security because people think of it as like an auditor tool. Yes, we care about security, not from the sense of like code contract security, because I think there's already a bunch of great products, whether that's like Octane or Cantina or Sherlock or, I feel like I see every senior security auditor releasing their own skills or AI auditing tool now. I think like there's contract risk and then there's like operational risk, right? Where for us, it's like, the security risk we're focused on is, again, like for a given multisig that's managing allocations on a vault. The security risk is if they try to sneak in like some allocation change or cap change or new adapter or access that's like slightly obfuscated, so that it's hard for you to notice like, oh, actually all of our assets that have been allocated to this specific part in 4 days when the time lock passes, it's going to go here instead. Right. And like that asset has new risks operationally as well. Right. And so like whenever I say like the security side of what we're building on, it's very much on the operational risks of just like even things just like how, certain curve pools, if you deploy them with the wrong initial parameters, there are different risks attached that we saw with like Wi-Fi, like Urin's old like 3-year-old vault from like last year. Where it's like, okay, the code is technically secure, but if you put the wrong combination of parameters, it's possible that now there are either risks or arbitrage of like, oh, between this allocation, actually there's someone watching who's going to snipe that pool beforehand so that it's more expensive. Like they actually get a better like redemption rate than like other depositors, right? So a lot of our focus is more on like, how do you manage that kind of like the unknown operational risk versus like, hey, is this contract going to get hacked or not? That's just not like, that's not our team skill set. And that's like, the benefit of Claude is you can add anyone else's MCP in or skills in if you want the like Solidity contract security, right? And like we recommend our customers to like be like, hey, install the Herd MCP and also like the Trailbit skills. And then also like the Dune MCP, or like we'll recommend adding these. But the good thing about AI is like we don't have to build all of that ourselves anymore. We can just be like, okay, I've used a bunch of these MCPs and skills. I kind of know which ones I like the most. I will just recommend those, and that's at like zero cost. So,
yeah, I see that. Maybe on the one example you've repeated is Morpho, and like sure there's like a whole universe below Morpho where it's like, okay, like there's like all of these vault curators, and you just said like, okay, like all of these vaults are now their own products, and that you can't, it's not like Uniswap v3 Pro where it's like the same product. But like, do you see this amount of complexity emerging? Like Uniswap v4 has some complexity, but like I think we can all agree that like the Uniswap v4 adoption curve has not progressed as fast as people were foreseeing. I think now there's like slight increases in volume, but it's mostly vanilla pools. It's not like there's like super complex like swap mechanisms. So like, is there any other like area that you see this kind of complexity and the need for Herd emerging right now?
Yeah, so I would say like, our main focuses right now are definitely on Morpho and Uniswap because they have the most like adapter and hook pattern. I think I see Uniswap is going to be doing a renewed push with hooks now that the foundation team has been brought in to the labs team. And like there's very simple cases of this I've seen where like Coinbase has a KYC pool that uses a hook that calls the EAS contract, right? Where it's just like, hey, they're going to EAS verify that an address is like from a KYC business country without revealing any information about the business. Just like, hey, this business is not from a sanctioned country, right? So we can allow that address to transact in the pool. And you do that with a hook. That's just like before swap, call EAS, validate this schema ID, and then let the swap go through, you know? And I think there's going to be a lot more like simple hooks like that, where it's like the complexity is different from vault complexity, but you know, you can start basically attaching verification to these pools with these kinds of hooks. I think the Aave v4, like the whole hub, like spoke thing is basically very similar to Morpho. Some people might not like that comparison, but it's similar to Morpho in terms of like, you are going to give, call it curators, more control over what they can manage. And, you know, Lido's ST vaults, Melo's vaults, Lagoon's vaults, there's going to be like Morpho's the first mover here in terms of configurable vaults and like, you know, good distribution. But I'm seeing like 10 or 20 like very good teams that are moving into this like kind of hook adapter configurable vault space. Every multisig is going to be like modularized. Like we already see it now with like between 7702 smart accounts and multisigs and like the wallet policies. Like we just know, like obviously the safest implementation of something is if it's on chain. If there's an off-chain logic somewhere, there's a chance something can go wrong, right? So like Safe already tried doing this with like, what was it called? Zodiac back in like 2023. They had like Zodiac modules or something. Safe has, I think the Safe's new versions, they still call it modules. But anyways, like wallets are going to keep seeing these extensions as well. Whether that's through sub accounts, whether that is through modules, whatever you want to call it. It's just like, you know, wallets will move more and more into being smart contracts. That's just kind of the natural evolution. And they just need extensibility there. And that's it's enough activity for us to chase after for a year or two. I think there's definitely still other exciting opportunities that we're seeing. But like for me, the end game is like all of these DeFi primitives are going to have adapters and hooks for either like connecting operations across things like Euler Swap does, or for like role management and permissions, which is kind of more of like the Steakhouse Aave like approach, where you just need to like, for whoever can redeem or deposit, wherever there's a queue involved for who can queue in or out first, like all of that has to be just extensions on top of these contracts. And you can't just enshrine it into the contract because like some people want it, some people don't. Different businesses are going to have different opinions on it. So it's not something you can just be like, oh, you know, like everyone, like, you know, like if everyone had to share the same deposit withdrawal queue into a contract, that's just not going to work for finance, because finance likes to have, I don't want to call it backdoor, but obviously preferential choices of like, you know, the clients they serve. And, you know, big money is not going to move without that, just candidly. Right. So for me, I see it as like, yeah, this expansion of complexity, this adapter hook module pattern is only going to become more popular.
Vaults mostly have been big, I guess, on Ethereum mainnet. Do you see other big chains with this happening, or like where do you see this taking place? Or maybe you have a hot take about the future here on where DeFi is big.
Yeah, I mean that's a very hard one. I think all these chains have gotten much better and smarter about their go-to-market, but a lot of this is also a lot more private now. So like what's happening on, you know, Tempo or Arc, or even whatever Mega ETH is working on, like a lot more of this is like, or even Avalanche is a good one with like all the RWA stuff they're pushing. Like a lot of it's just not public. What I'll say is like these BD deals take a lot more time. Like a lot of the bottleneck now is not like the smart contract development, but more like hey, if you want to BD to get Coinbase to add your vault to their app, like it's a 6 to 8 month process potentially. And so I don't think it's like one of those things where it's like, it's not like consumer where we'll see like insane explosive growth all at once. It's just like, we're going to keep seeing this drip of like, oh, wow. Like seeing Blackstone or is it BlackRock working with Uniswap on the whatever Beetle fund and tokenizing it. Like, sure, that took like half a year or a year, you know? But it's like, we're moving at institutional pace now. Kind of a cop-out answer, but we only support Ethereum and Base right now. And so I've also not been closely studying if like Monad versus Avalanche have a very different, interesting approach. Because I don't think the institutions really care about the chain that much. Like they just care about who's going to do the most custom work for them. So
do you have a hot take of like where we see agents on chain in a and a timeline to go along with it?
Yes, this is the question I get almost every day. It's like,
I'm sure.
Yes, I understand the institutions have money, but what about agents? What about X402? What about agent commerce? What about the bazaar? Like, oh my God.
Putting you on the spot.
It's interesting. I think I definitely have some hot takes on this. I'm trying to think whose bridges am I going to burn? I think a lot of the payments infra we've seen today, or agent infra we've seen today is like, I don't want to say dancing around the wrong problems, but it's kind of still going after like the lowest hanging fruit, right? Like when I look at like X42, for example, like part of me just looks at it and I'm like, it's somewhat of a glorified like 4337, where it's like you have a facilitator, that's a paymaster, you know, like you still have to spin up these, like there's still like the fact that it's like people are like, oh yeah, you can replace all your API keys with wallets. I'm like, if I have a bunch of backend servers, I'm not going to assign a wallet to every backend server. That's just like a security nightmare for many, many reasons, right? And if we talk about like pure agent to agent commerce, like one thing that I challenge any wallet company to do, like all these wallet companies that are like, hey, you can now spin up a wallet in like a single command, you know, I'm like, okay, spin that up, add 100K to it, and like let people interact with it. You know, like if you really think that it's like agents are ready to buy things, go put 100K into the agent, see what it buys, you know, see what the experience is. And I'm like, I think you'll very quickly find like someone's going to have an API where they charge $10 per request and it's going to burn through your whole agent's wallet, right? Because he's still very easy to prompt inject. And like that comes down to like the policy layer of like, okay, like one of the things I've seen is like Privy is obviously one of the best consumer wallets out there. They don't have all of the policy systems that like Fortify and Turnkey do, right? Like Fortify and Turnkey, I think, are better positioned for like agent to agent commerce, but like they're already making so much money from institutions that it's like, okay, why pay attention to this like tiny agent to agent narrative when there's like multi-billion-dollar institutions who are actually implementing this? So it's kind of a weird time where the marketing is ahead of the tech. Because sometimes, like at some point, the tech is ahead of the marketing or the tech is ahead of the customer. I don't see any of the agent to agent stuff as like, this is everything that is promised. I wish people in the conversation would focus more around like wallet policies and like how, like if you want to actually let an agent buy and transact on its own APIs, like if I wanted to give my own Claude Code $1,000 to spend on any of its research and trust that it's going to use that sparingly, you know, like how do you actually set that policy? Right, because everyone can supply an agent. Like we're very supply sided. I can go and add X402 to my herd MCP and say, hey, every request is $5, right? But who's buying? You know, and I think that's like a very big missing link to me right now. That I'm like, I have not seen any great answers to. It's like, oh, okay, is it everyone using Claude Code? Do you expect everyone using Claude Code to spin up a wallet now to consume these APIs? I think like, sure, it could be much easier for the agent to spin up the API if it doesn't have to like go through the sign up API key request service. Like, I do not doubt that it's easier, right? But like the whole payment process of like, all right, now how do you set guidelines around how much you can pay for what? How do you track this? Especially with people who use OpenClaw and Claude Code, where it's like, I'm going to let this run for 8 to 12 hours and come back. Like, I guarantee you money will just be like shit out the door if you let the agent find its own APIs and just pay for things. So I'm like, I don't want to sound bearish on it. I'm like, it makes a lot of like the tech makes sense. I just think a lot of the marketing and the narrative and the focus of it is just not solving the real problem we have, if that makes sense. It's all solving like, how do you create the cute demo of like, my agent bought something on Amazon? I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I feel like
that's fair. Very fair.
I've heard some people like experimenting using agents to buy flights ticket, and I myself wouldn't do that. I don't know. Like, I've heard people doing that. I can't imagine myself. Maybe now I'm vibe coding a lot, and I'm not really familiar with all these like front end hosting services. I can give my maybe like Cloud Popping like, here's $50, do like whatever subscription that you needed to like host this website or so. Right. But I don't know. I'm curious if you guys see yourself doing any of this or using the agentic payments for any use cases.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's like there are tons of things we could do a cool marketing demo with, right? There are very few things where I'm like, yes, I would trust this agent to do this without me watching over it. And I think on like and this is some feedback I've talked to the X4 team, like X4 2 team about, and like I support them and love them a lot. Like, they're a great team. But like, for example, like if you look at like, why do people use Stripe and like Metronome? It's not because you can do payments. It's everything from the invoices to the fraud protection to like the credit system of like, Boxer. And I know this very well, the pain of having a credit system and dealing with like, what if you want to have sponsored credits? What if you want to discount things? What if you want to sign a contract where it's like you have now specific, like for this year, a contract and overage system? Like that is what we have to translate with agent like policies, right? It's not just like, oh, hey, you have a wallet, I have a wallet, we can pay $2 on this cool demo. I'm like, okay, cool. I like, I get that it's great for Twitter. I get that it's great for marketing. And like a lot of pushback I've gotten is like, Andrew, we need great marketing. I'm like, yes, okay. We have marketing now. People now know what X402 is. Like, like, can we focus on like can we focus on the real problem, like the boring stuff? Like, no one wants to recreate Stripe and Metronome, right? But like, because it's not sexy, right? It's not sexy as saying like, yes, I built agent to agent payments and like I made this thing work. But it's like someone has to work on that, and I'm counting on one of these big companies, whether that's Coinbase or Tempo or Stripe, to like actually focus on building out that boring stuff instead of just like, hey, here's a shorter command to spin up a wallet, but I'm not doing that either. So I can't complain that much. I don't want to be the guy who's like complaining all the time and then be like, but I'm not going to do it. So
I think for us, it's going to take a while to get there to like, hey, manage my money. But right. I think there's a lot of people for whom, self-custody is like not the right idea. Because it's just there's a lot of complexity with self-custody and it's just not. I think custodying funds is also like, it's also good to pay for a service to someone who actually knows how to do it. And eventually maybe there's a point where it's like less risky for the average Joe to have your agent manage your money than yourself. I think we're far from there, and we, like you said, like guidelines are going to take a while. Like the rate of progress of AI has been, I think, impressive. And I've found myself like, very surprised by where we are. And like, if I had to predict a year ago where we are now, like I definitely wouldn't have seen be that far, Cloud Code and all this is still like crazy to me. Like, what is it? Like a year and a half ago, we had like, what is it? Will Smith eating spaghetti in a really weird way. And that was like the peak of AI, like, look how far we've gone, and think about where we are in a year and a half. And, it's like things can go quickly. That's
AI,
also
AI is
my
growing
point on
very
things.
quick. Crypto just keeps getting marketing distracted. Like crypto will create X402, and then most of the volume comes from meme coins, and people are like, "Look at the volume," and I'm like, "No, don't get distracted yet. Like you have come back, focus." Like crypto. Every time we start getting some success, we're like, bring out the gun. We're like, all right, time to shoot our foot. I'm just like,
what's financial engineering on chain is the current success that we shouldn't stray away from? Is that what you're?
I just mean like whatever we're building in crypto, like just build the boring stuff. Build like everyone talks about, like, don't be skeuomorphic, and I'm like, yeah, okay, but like there's a reason why people like using Stripe's billing system, right? And it's not because it uses credit cards.
Yeah. I see. I see.
Yeah. That's why it's like the same thing of like, all right, the same thing for like when we're pushing institutions. It's like, okay, you can build more protocols, but someone has to explain and manage and like make this protocol work with like these 1,000 people, more like multi-thousand people institutions that have to like build a lot of trust and like have a lot of systems around these protocols. You can't just keep yeeting out protocols and being like, yes, people will just move 20 billion into it. Right. So anyways, it'll come. The agentic future is coming. I'm still very much a believer in agents. So my whole company is built off of it. so don't take what I'm saying as like, I don't believe crypto and agents will work, because that is literally my whole company.
You're a cautious believer, which is good.
I'm a cautious believer. Yeah, I've been in crypto too long.
Foreseeing the trajectory of these things seems to be so fundamentally impossible, where it's like, if you had told me 2 years ago where we are now with AI, like I think like fundamentally comes back to like humans are really bad at like looking at exponentials. And like nobody can really like visualize this, and like nobody really understands. And I think we're increasingly seeing that like the productivity of these AI labs is like really kind of like increased by just them using their own tooling very successfully. If you look at like what the Claude Code team is shipping, like I think there's like many takes in the industry of like whether Claude Code is actually good or bad and whatever. But like at the end of the day, they're like shipping this thing really, really fast. What would have taken like years of iteration before is now like, okay, they've
it's iteration.
There's like 1 year of iteration, and like they're already at this stage, and like they're already reaching so many developers, so many active users. It's like, there's definitely something cooking here. I think is there like a natural kind of like phase out where we just hit the limits of physics as to like how far can you push these systems? I like literally like people are not like, I think energy consumption is like a really big constraint for like training data models. And so like I think there's like a lot of like essentially things that nobody understands. I think that's like what makes, I think like predicting the future for me is really hard in that sense, where like I'm hearing Dobby's take of like, somebody is like, the agent is better off managing the money than themselves. So it's like, that's such a funny, like, just like go to the terminal, like, please make me more money. Don't make any mistakes. It's like,
make no mistakes.
Like when I use Claude with the Herd MCP now, I'm like, it does better research than I do. Just because it can put in so much more iteration and pay attention to the details. And I'm like, if you give it the tools, it's already a better researcher than I am. It can already explain things better than me, because like I can only explain things once. It can explain it 1,000 times. All right. So like, if I was to keep putting out blogs on explainers of whatever protocol, like that's not, sad as it makes me, it's not needed anymore, in some sense. So
it's actually very funny that you just took your
I've officially taken my
done, and you've just built a company that now does this professionally. It actually makes a lot of sense. I can see why you're doing this.
I'm like, well, if AI is going to take my job, I'm going to make sure it's my AI that takes my job. So I will be the only one to take my job, basically. So, anyways.
I tend to be overly optimistic, but like there's a good article by Hasib on like exponentials and how we're really bad at seeing those. I just want to have it linked like in the description. I think it's a really cool read. But I do tend to be very optimistic and not as cautious as you are. But also, I'm not building any product, so it's like, not, that's not my problem. I just want to see cool things right from the ashes.
I'm like, I really don't care if I have a job long term or not. I'm just like, this is something cool to build, and I think, I obviously care the most about just like getting more people into crypto. So like that's, I am more motivated than that than worried about my job being lost. So
that's fair.
So yeah, I feel you.
All right, I think with that,
cool.
For the agentic future,
cheers with our Dune cup.
We raised the Dune Max to the agentic future. Very, very funny that we have the old Dune crew here, the new Dune crew.
Always.
I guess no new Dune crew actually.
There's no new, it's just old
timers.
All the young ones are building claw bots to trade poly market. They're not. No one is looking at their career being like, I want to analyze crypto data. We're the only ones who are like, yes, I can see myself doing this for you.
Genuinely, we're trying to hire, and there's nobody coming after us.
It's so much effort. It's so much effort.
I mean, now it's easier than ever, but I guess it's like it really.
It's harder than just yeeting a bot at Polymarket.
Yeah, that's fair.
and watch it lose all your money.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the problem is nobody understands stuff anymore.
Yeah, that is.
Like everyone's just outsourced their understanding to like the bots, and everyone's just prompting, and now it's like nobody knows what to tell the bots anymore. But anyways,
separate existential crisis.
maybe Boxer Dune's new user cohort needs to be the agents now. So.
It does in a sense.
Oh, you cannot imagine what I can do with the Dune MCP. It's like completely.
It's
insane.
great.
I'm like like any spellbook things, any like curated data things that I build is like. I just have like 5 cursor windows open and I just switch between them, and like they're building all the stuff for me. It's like completely.
I'm very glad it was released. I was bothering Garrett and Frederick about it for like 8 months because I was like, please don't make me wrap the Dune API. I'm gonna cry.
Yeah, I had to do that for like the last 6 months, and finally it's like, we have an official version, and like you can like think directly into like the search engine and all of that stuff. It works.
I was like, I need to be able to search. If I can't search tables, like the endpoints mean nothing to me. So, anyways,
Wait, but okay. One thing you just said, Boxer, having 5 windows open, and now I need to show you the next step, which is to have those like multi-agents management tool, like this conductor.build, this pentagon.run. But I'll stop here. I look like I'm AI psychosis.
we all are in different ways.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. You've listened to the Index podcast. Share this podcast with a friend. Leave some feedback for us. Join the Telegram group. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Crypto day wasters, come join us for the parade. From Bitcoin ETF to Solana meme coin trade, uncovering public secrets in the blockchain shade. Bad chiller, cherry picking liar. We call them out and set chart crime on fire.